Welcome to the Rational Egoist, episode 17. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. So, since he's been in the news quite a bit, I thought today we would talk about President or former President Donald Trump. Now, I'm nowhere near legally savvy enough to address the current case against him. I don't know what the law is, and I don't know how to interpret it. What I want to focus on today is why I personally do not support him. Now, of course, his supporters will just accuse me of being biased and suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. But nevertheless, I think it's important that I make the case. In doing so, I won't be relying on the mainstream media and their interpretations of his behavior. I will be relying on stuff that is a matter of public record. So, the first thing I don't like about Trump is the fact that he always claims to be the victim. He never accepts losses and he never accepts personal responsibility. Case in point, when Barack Obama won the presidency in 2012, Trump said the election was rigged. Now, of course, he had endorsed Mitt Romney, so the loss perhaps he took personally. His show, The Apprentice, when it didn't win an Emmy, he said the Emmys were rigged. Okay, so the Emmys are rigged against him as well. In the primary season in 2016, he refused to commit to supporting the eventual Republican nominee, saying it depended on whether he was treated fairly. When he lost to Ted Cruz in Iowa, he said Ted Cruz stole the election. Prior to the 2016 general election, he said the election was being rigged. Then, of course, there's his 2020 loss, which he said was stolen. And now the court case where he may be being railroaded, I don't know, but he claims that he is. My point is that he has a history of always blaming other people, saying things are rigged against him, never accepting defeat. These are not character traits that I admire in somebody. And also, as in the case of the boy who cried wolf, it makes it very difficult to discern when he's actually being screwed from when he is not. Now, let's consider some of the people that know him very well. Michael Cohen, for instance, has been speaking out against him. The amount of people that were a part of his administration that have spoken out against him is substantial. His defense secretary, James Mattis, has spoken against him. His secretary of the Navy, Richard V. Spencer, has spoken out against him. His national security advisor, John Bolton, spoke out against him. His chief of staff, John Kelly, has spoken out against him. Homeland Security advisor, Tom Bossert, has spoken out against him. His communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, has spoken out against him. His secretary of state, Rex Tillerson, has spoken out against him, as has his education secretary, Betsy DeVos. So I'm sure that Trump supporters will say that these people are just turncoats and they're not reliable. That's fine. But Trump assured us that he would be picking the best people. Remember this now. Prior to winning the election, he said that he would surround himself with the best people. So either these people are all telling the truth in their assessment of Trump, or Trump is a woefully inadequate judge of character. Either one, in my opinion, makes him unfit for office, right? That's just the way I view it. Also, Republicans are big on American history. They're big on the Constitution, American values, and all that. I happen to think that as long as the country's governed by the Constitution, we ought to go by it and we ought to adhere to it, right? So, in my view, and I think it's easily demonstrable, Donald Trump is not a supporter of the Constitution. Consider in a meeting in 2018, in a discussion about what to do about gun violence, Trump said, he was in favor of gun confiscation if they had evidence or rumors or some such thing that a person was dangerous. Mike Pence responded, well, you have to give them due process, to which Trump responded, well, take the guns first, then give them due process. Clearly unconstitutional, clearly not a supporter of the Second Amendment. In 2016, after the San Bernardino shooting, Trump put pressure on Apple to allow the FBI into its security system so that they could check the phone of the shooter. And Trump was clearly in support of forcing Apple to do so. How he was going to get around the Fourth Amendment, I don't know. My point is that it's another instance of him not supporting the Constitution. Trump also supported the Kelo decision in my home state of Connecticut, which expanded eminent domain to take private property to give to private companies. Now, eminent domain in the Constitution, it is allowed, but it's to take private property for public uses. Trump favored expanding it to private uses, which, again, although the Supreme Court upheld it 5-4, I think clearly violates the Constitution. Eminent domain in itself, morally, in my view, is very problematic. Nonetheless, it is constitutional, but taking private property for private use, not so much. So what about his policy positions? Well, on entitlements, he's been very inconsistent. He said he wouldn't touch them. Then he said he would consider touching them. Then he's pressured Republicans not to bring up Medicare and Medicaid and debt ceiling fights. The bottom line is that as president, he did nothing to cut them. How you can cut the debt without cutting entitlements is beyond me. I personally think that the evidence is strong that these entitlements are unconstitutional anyway, but nevertheless, Trump has not supported cutting them, and he has been very inconsistent, to say the least. So what about on capitalism? I'm huge on capitalism. Big fan, as I'm sure you all know. So what about Trump? Is Trump a supporter of capitalism? Well, Trump supports minimum wage laws. He's said that perhaps he would support raising the federal minimum wage to $15. He was certainly in favor of raising it to $10. Doesn't sound like a capitalist to me. Capitalism is free enterprise, and their system of free enterprise, people are free to contract. Thus, employers and employees ought to be free to negotiate the salaries and wages that will be paid. It's not the government's business. It certainly isn't Donald Trump's business. Donald Trump also favored paid family leave for federal employees. Well, how are you going to pay for this? You are ultimately going to have to either raise taxes or increase the debt, which Trump certainly has never opposed raising the debt, at least not in his official capacity. But nevertheless, these are not capitalistic positions. Trump has also been a big fan of tariffs. Now, remember, my argument here, this has nothing to do with whether tariffs are a good thing or a bad thing. I know they're a horrible thing, but that's not my point. My point is that tariffs are not part of capitalism. Capitalism involves free trade. Tariffs are not free trade. Therefore, tariffs are not capitalist. So when Trump is so adamant about tariffs, he is taking an anti-capitalist position. Trump also drove up the debt incredibly. During Trump's tenure, he drove up the debt by $7.8 trillion. Yes, $7.8 trillion. That is hardly capitalist in my view, and in the view, I believe, of anybody that's paying attention or knows what capitalism is. You ought not to be driving up the federal debt. You ought not to be borrowing money. Trump also in 2019. Now, I know Trump supporters out there, you love to blame Biden for the inflation. It's all Biden. But the fact of the matter is that in 2019, Donald Trump put pressure on Fed Chairman Jerome Powell to keep interest rates low. So what happens when you keep interest rates low? More money goes into the economy, prices get driven up, inflation increases, economic distortions occur, recessions follow. Trump, again, put pressure on the Fed chairman. First of all, the Fed is supposed to be independent from politics. It's not, of course, but it is supposed to be. So just the fact that Trump thought it was okay to pressure them crosses a line. But the fact that he pressured them to keep interest rates low, again, and not allow the market to dictate interest rates, shows that Trump is not a capitalist. Now, what about things like bailouts? Well, in 2008, Trump supported the bank bailouts. Again, clearly not a capitalist position. Look, you might say it's okay. You might be in favor of bailouts, but don't do so and tell me you're a capitalist, because you simply are not. Trump has also favored bailing out corporations, Boeing, for instance. So clearly, this man is not a capitalist. So what about the promises? What about the promises that Trump made when he was running for office? Well, he said he was going to build a border wall and that Mexico was going to pay for it. Okay, that didn't happen. There's no border wall, and Mexico certainly wasn't going to pay for it. So it's a failed promise. Trump said that he would achieve economic growth at GDP growth at 6-7%. That didn't happen. Another failed promise. Trump said that he would pay down the debt. He expanded the debt. So there's another failed promise. So for everybody that says that he kept all his promises, it's clearly not true. So people may say, well, yeah, but he's just the president. He has to work with other people and, he's dependent on other people. Fine. That's all true. I'm not disputing it. But he promised he could do so. He said he's the deal maker. He knows how to deal with people. He knows how to get things done. He didn't get them done. Therefore, it's a failure. It's that simple. The guy said he was going to do things. He didn't do them. He didn't keep his promise. Plain and simple. So the question, I guess, is why do so many people devoutly support this man? I mean, he even said that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and his supporters would still follow him, which is mind-boggling to me. It's like, to me, that's an insult. For somebody to say that to me, that I'm going to blindly follow them no matter what, is an insult. Evidently, his supporters are not insulted by this, and they continue to follow him, defend him, believe him, despite all the lies he's told. And I'm not going to get into the lies he's told because I'd be here forever. They're well documented. Just look into it. It's not a difficult thing to find. I mean, just as an example, he once said that Ted Cruz was fine to run for office despite being born out of the country. Then he, when he was running against Cruz, changed his mind and said, oh, no, he shouldn't be allowed to run for the presidency. Clearly, he's being dishonest in one of those statements. I don't know which one. Who the hell knows? The guy's a pathological liar. Again, his lies are well documented. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But again, so why do people follow him? And furthermore, people claim he's a capitalist. He's a constitutionalist. He's a conservative. Clearly, this is all false. People also claim that prior to Trump, the country had been going downhill in recent years. And now with Biden in office, they claim it's going downhill in recent years. They need to check their facts, because the country has been straying from the Constitution since the country's inception, whether it be Hamilton's support for the bank, John Adams' support for the Alien and Sedition Acts, Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase, Madison's rechartering the bank after initially opposing the bank. I mean, I could go on, but at least you have to concede that with the New Deal, the founding vision was gone, period. I mean, Social Security, really? And then the acts of 1965, when you had Medicare and then Medicaid came into existence, welfare programs, these were in effect long before Barack Obama took office. So the country had strayed from its founding long before. It's not a new phenomenon. So the idea that Trump is he's got to stop what's been recently occurring is absolutely silly. So what is it that draws people to Trump? Now, I'm going to speculate here. It's something I don't normally like to do, but hey, I mean, I guess we all do it. And I have a hypothesis. Trump always, frequently claims that he's the victim of this, that, or the other rigging. And I think that his supporters also feel that they're victims. They feel that they're victims of foreign trade. It's taking their job, and I'm doing hand quotes, or immigrants that are coming into the country and taking their jobs. Again, the quotes are there. And they feel like they're losing their country. They're maybe losing their position of power in the country. Whatever it is, they feel like they're victims. They feel like they're victims of the media. They feel like they're victims now of the woke movement. And I think that when Trump constantly is claiming to be a victim, there's a sort of projection there where these people are identifying with Trump qua victim, which is ironic because when it was minorities claiming to be victims, conservatives were very anti-victim, but now they feel like victim and are constantly claiming victimhood. So I think that is a large part of what's going on. They feel like victims. They think Trump's a victim. They identify with Trump, and they all get to gather in their victimhood. This is extremely dangerous. One, because we need people that are going to take responsibility for their own lives, not people who are going to blame everybody else for the bad things that happen to them. But also because it's so against the principles of America that they claim to be fighting for, the rugged individualism, the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, the pauper to millionaire. The whole American story is one of self-reliance. And for the party that claims to be representing American tradition and to now be so engrossed in this victimology is just, it's a disappointment. It's quite frankly, it's a disgrace. So I guess the question then is, where do we go from here? What can we do? I mean, the left in Biden clearly, I mean, the far left wing is clearly socialist, and the centrist Democrats don't seem to be doing much to stem that tide. They're also embracing the madness of wokeism. So, obviously you can't go Democrat. They're anti-capitalist. They're more and more anti-free speech. They're just as much with embracing the victimology, which, by the way, so a lot of people claim that Trump is important right now because he's the antidote to woke, because he's willing to fight woke. The problem with that is, even if Trump defeats woke, which I personally think that he amplifies it because they respond to him and it just, each side gets louder and louder. But even granting that he could stop woke, what are you replacing it with? Just another irrational ideology. I don't even know if you can call it an ideology, because it's basically just right-wing populism delved in a cult of personality. So I don't think that's the answer. What I do think is the answer is a rational philosophy that supports individual liberty and free market capitalism. Now, Ayn Rand promoted such an all-encompassing life philosophy based on reason and epistemology, self-interest in ethics, and capitalism in politics. To me, Ayn Rand is the perfect antidote to both wokeism and Trumpism, because far from embracing their irrational subjectivism, she says there's an objective reality that exists, and it's the job of reason to discover it. And it's also the job of reason to decide how we should be living our lives and what type of political system that we should live in. So to me, Ayn Rand is the answer. But let me just say, even those who are hostile to Rand and don't embrace Rand, there's still many, many people out there that support capitalism, that support free markets. I mean, disciples of the Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises come to mind. There's also disciples of Frederick Bastiat, the 19th century French philosopher, economist, and politician. So there are many examples of people that are arguing for capitalism. So I think that capitalism ultimately is, when it comes to politics, free market capitalism is what we should be advocating. First of all, it respects the rights of the individual. Secondly, it has created more prosperity, even in its crippled state, than any other system in history. So, as antidotes to Trump and wokeism, first, Ayn Rand. Second, free market capitalism. That's the way we should be headed. Well, that's going to wrap this up for today. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. Please join us next time on The Rational Egoist. By the way, like, share, subscribe.